The crystal halls of the Galactic War Council rang with the sound of 100 different voices. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their floating chairs, each one shaped to fit their unique biology. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and a few looked almost like walking rocks. But today they all turned to listen to one old diplomat who stood at the center of the great chamber. Ambassador Veltar was ancient, even by Nexian standards. His blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and his forearms trembled slightly as he gripped the speaking staff. The crystalline walls around him glowed with soft light, casting strange shadows that made his warnings seem even more urgent. "You do not understand what you are planning," Veltar said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "I have seen what happens when you attack the humans. I have watched entire civilizations disappear because they made this same mistake." A ripple of laughter went through the assembled delegates. The Kethron representative clicked his mandibles in amusement. The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles wiggled with what passed for mirth among her people. Even the normally serious rock-like Granite Lord seemed to find humor in the old diplomat's words. Supreme War Commander Krixtal rose from his massive chair. The Vorthon was impressive even by his species' standards. 12 feet tall with thick armor plating covering his gray skin. His red eyes glowed as he looked down at the aging ambassador. "Respected Veltar," Krixtal said, his voice booming. "Through the chamber, with all due respect, you speak of humans as if they were some great threat. They are children playing with primitive weapons. Their fastest ships barely reach half-light speed. Their largest vessels could fit inside our smallest cruisers." The Vorthon commander activated a holographic display that showed comparative images. Human ships looked tiny next to the massive Vorthon dreadnoughts. Human weapons appeared crude compared to the sleek energy cannons of the Empire. Even human colonies looked small and fragile compared to the mighty fortress worlds of the Vorthons. "Look at the evidence," Krixtal continued. "They have existed in space for less than 200 of their years. We have ruled the stars for over 3,000. Their entire military could not match a single battle group of our fleet." Veltar closed his eyes and seemed to age another decade in that moment. "You did not know the Mordak Confederation, did you, Commander?" "The Mordak?" Krixtal's voice carried confusion. "That name is not in our historical records." "Exactly," Veltar whispered. "They existed 20 cycles ago, a proud warrior race with ships that could destroy planets. They had weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Their empire stretched across 50 star systems. The old ambassador walked slowly around the speaking circle, his forearms gesturing as he told his story. The Mordak attacked a single human trading post. Just one. Small station with maybe 1,000 humans aboard. They killed everyone, men, women, children. The Mordak commander broadcast the execution across human space as a warning. "And what happened?" asked the Granite Lord representative, his voice like grinding stone. "The humans came," Veltar said simply. "Not with threats or demands. They simply came. First one ship, then 10, then 100. They did not negotiate. They did not offer terms. They did not even declare war formally." Krixtal leaned forward, his red eyes narrowing. Surely the Mordak defeated such a small force. The first wave, yes, and the second, and the third. Veltar's voice grew quieter, making everyone strain to listen. But the humans kept coming. Every time the Mordak destroyed a human fleet, 2 more appeared. Every time they thought they had won, more humans arrived with better weapons and new tactics. The chamber had grown completely silent now. Even the constant humming of the translation devices seemed muted. The war lasted 8 of their years, Veltar continued. By the end, the humans were not just fighting the Mordak military. They were hunting every Mordak in the galaxy, ship by ship, planet by planet. They found every hidden base, every secret colony, every refugee camp. But surely some escaped. The Kethron delegate's voice clicked with nervousness. Veltar shook his head slowly. That is what I am trying to tell you. Humans do not fight like we do. When we go to war, we fight until we win or lose. Then we negotiate peace. But humans, when you hurt them, they do not stop until every single one of you is gone. You speak of genocide, Crixtal said, his voice filled with disgust. We would never allow such barbarism in civilized space. Would you stop them? Veltar asked quietly. When they finally came for the last Mordak stronghold, 17 different species tried to intervene. The humans ignored them all. They did not attack anyone else, but they would not be stopped. The last Mordak died exactly 20 years after they killed that first human child. The Vorthon commander straightened in his chair. These are stories, old one. Myths to frighten children. If humans were so dangerous, why do they hide in their small corner of space? Why do they not conquer us all? Because they do not want to, Veltar said, and his words carried a weight that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. Humans only become dangerous when you threaten what they protect. Leave them alone, and they are peaceful traders and explorers, but attack their families, kill their children. He let the words hang in the air. Crixtal activated another holographic display. This one showed the human colony of New Busan, a small farming world on the edge of Vorthon space. The planet looked peaceful and defenseless, with only a few orbital defense platforms and a handful of patrol ships. This colony has been sending ships into our territory, Crixtal announced. They claim to be traders, but we know they are spies. We have decided to make an example of them. A simple demonstration of Vorthon power will force humanity to respect our borders. No, Veltar said, his voice filled with desperate urgency. Please, Commander, choose any other option. Blockade them, capture their ships, send them warnings, but do not attack their colony. Do not harm their civilians. The decision is made, Crixtal declared. One precise strike against their military targets will show them our superiority. They will surrender immediately, and this minor border dispute will be resolved with minimal bloodshed. Veltar looked around the chamber, seeing the same confidence in every alien face. They had not listened to his warnings. They could not see past their own assumptions about warfare and civilization. How many civilians live on that world? Veltar asked quietly. Approximately 50,000, Crixtal replied. But we will target only military installations. Civilian casualties will be minimal. The old ambassador gathered his robes around him and began walking toward the chamber exit. As he reached the great doors, he turned back one final time. Commander Crixtal, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. When this is over, when your empire is nothing but dust and memory, remember that I tried to warn you. Remember that you could have chosen peace. The great doors sealed behind him with a sound like thunder. In the silence that followed, Crixtal stood alone at the center of the chamber, surrounded by delegates who suddenly looked less confident than they had moments before. But the Vorthon commander was not a creature given to doubt. His orders were already being transmitted to the fleet commanders. Within days, Vorthon ships would reach the human colony. The demonstration would be swift and decisive. He had no way of knowing that he had just signed the death warrant for his entire species. Captain Lee Hyun stood on the bridge of the orbital defense station New Seoul, watching the morning sun rise over the farming world below. New Busan was a peaceful place, covered in golden wheat fields and small cities where families raised their children far from the crowded worlds of Earth. The station's windows gave him a perfect view of the colony ships coming and going, carrying grain and manufactured goods to neighboring systems. It was a quiet morning, the kind Lee Hyun had grown to love during his 3 years as defense commander. His small fleet consisted of 12 patrol ships and the defense station itself. Not much by military standards, but more than enough to handle pirates or smugglers. New Busan had never seen real combat. "Captain," called communications officer Park Min from her station, "we're getting some unusual readings on long-range sensors. Multiple contacts approaching from the Vorthan border." Lee Hyun walked over to look at the displays. The sensor readings showed a formation of ships much larger than anything that usually visited their system. The energy signatures were definitely Vorthan. But there were far more vessels than any normal trading convoy would need. "How many ships?" Lee Hyun asked. 37 confirmed contacts, sir. Looks like a full battle group formation." Park Min's voice carried a note of worry. "Captain, those are warships. Big ones." Lee Hyun felt his stomach tighten. New Busan had good relations with most neighboring species, including the Vorthans. There had been some minor disputes about trading routes lately, but nothing that should require a military response. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let's find out what they want." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a massive Vorthan dreadnought. At its center stood Supreme War Commander Krixtal, his imposing figure making even the large bridge seem small, his red eyes fixed on Lee Hyun with what looked like mild irritation. "I am Supreme War Commander Krixtal of the Vorthan Empire," the alien announced. "You are Captain Lee Hyun of the human colony New Busan." "That's correct, Commander," Lee Hyun replied, keeping his voice steady and diplomatic. "Welcome to our system. How can we help you today?" "You can help by surrendering immediately," Krixtal said, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. "Your colony has been sending spy ships into Vorthan space. This violation of our sovereignty cannot be tolerated." Lee Hyun blinked in surprise. "Commander, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We have no spy ships. All our vessels are registered trading craft. We've been completely open about our commercial activities." "Do not lie to me, human." Krixtal's voice grew colder. "We have evidence of your spying activities. The Vorthan Empire demands the immediate surrender of your colony. You will disarm your defenses and prepare to accept Vorthan occupation." The bridge of New Seoul became very quiet. Lee Hyun could hear the nervous breathing of his crew as they listened to the impossible demand. In the background, he could see more Vorthan ships moving into attack positions around the planet. "Commander Krixtal," Lee Hyun said carefully, "I respectfully decline your demand. New Busan is a peaceful colony under the protection of the human Federation. We have committed no crimes against your empire. If you have specific concerns about our trade activities, I'm sure we can resolve them through diplomatic channels." Krixtal's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. "Diplomatic channels? You mistake me for a negotiator, Captain. I am here to demonstrate Vorthan superiority. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will take your colony by force." "And if I refuse?" Lee Hyun asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then your people will learn what happens to those who defy the Vorthan Empire," Krixtal replied. "Your military targets will be eliminated first. If resistance continues, we will expand our target list to include civilian infrastructure. Lee. Hyun felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. Commander, threatening civilians is a violation of galactic law. I must ask you to reconsider this course of action. Galactic law? Krixtal seemed genuinely amused. Captain, we are the law in this region of space. Your surrender will prevent unnecessary bloodshed. The transmission cut out, leaving Lee Hyun staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew looked shocked and frightened. They had all heard the threat clearly. Orders, Captain? Asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Ho Lee. Hyun looked down at the peaceful world below. 50,000 people lived down there. Farmers and shopkeepers, teachers and children. They had come to New Busan to build a better life, and now they were caught in what seemed like an impossible situation. Signal all patrol ships to defensive positions, he ordered. Activate the planetary defense grid, and get me a direct line to Dr. Park Soo at the research station. Dr. Park Soo appeared on the screen moments later. She was a xenobiologist who had been studying local plant life, but Lee Hyun knew she had military experience from before becoming a scientist. Her calm face showed she had already heard about the Vorthan demands. Captain, she said without preamble, I've been monitoring their communications. This isn't a border dispute. They're planning to make an example of us. What do you recommend, Doctor? Fight, she said simply. They're not interested in negotiation. They want to show the galaxy that humans can be bullied into submission. If we surrender now, every human colony becomes a target, Lee Hyun nodded. It was what he had already decided, but hearing it from someone with Dr. Park Soo's experience confirmed his thinking. Begin evacuation of civilian areas near military targets, he ordered his crew, and send a priority message to Earth. Full details of the Vorthan demands and our response. What should I tell them our response is? Asked Communications Officer Park Min Lee. Hyun looked out at the Vorthan fleet surrounding his world. 37 warships against his 12 patrol boats and 1 defense station. The odds were impossible, but sometimes you had to make a stand regardless of the odds. Tell them we respectfully decline the Vorthan ultimatum. New Busan remains, a free human colony. The hour passed quickly. Lee Hyun used the time to coordinate with the planetary government and begin civilian evacuations. The colonists responded with remarkable calm, moving their families away from potential target areas, while the militia prepared to defend their homes. When Krixtal's voice came over the communications array again, his tone had shifted from annoyed to coldly professional. Captain Lee Hyun, your hour has expired. Will you surrender? No, Commander Krixtal. We will not. Then you have chosen death for your people. Do not say you were not warned. The first missiles struck New Seoul Station. 3 minutes later, Lee Hyun felt the deck plates buckle under his feet as the shields absorbed the initial impact. His tactical displays lit up with damage reports and targeting information. Return fire, he ordered. All ships, engage at will. The battle for New Busan had begun. But even as his small fleet fought desperately against impossible odds, Lee Hyun could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger and more terrible than anyone could imagine. Admiral Kim Dae sat in the war room deep beneath the mountains of Earth, staring at the transmission from New Busan. The holographic display showed the last desperate moments of Captain Lee Hyun's defense, recorded by Dr. Park Soo before the orbital station was destroyed. Around the conference table, the highest leaders of humanity watched in complete silence. The images were difficult to see. Vorthon missiles struck the elementary school first, then the hospital, then the civilian evacuation center. The camera shook as explosions rocked the research facility where Dr. Park Soo was hiding. Through it all, her voice remained steady as she documented what was happening. "They're targeting civilians deliberately," Dr. Park Soo's voice came through. The speakers. The military targets were destroyed in the first wave. Now they're hunting families. President Yoon-mi closed her eyes as the recording showed a Vorthon fighter destroying a transport full of refugee children. The president was a grandmother herself, and seeing those small faces disappear in fire was almost too much to bear. Final casualty count? Admiral Kim Dae asked quietly. General Choi Won consulted his tablet. 3,000 confirmed dead, including Captain Lee Hyun and most of his crew. Dr. Park Soo managed to escape in one of the last evacuation ships. And the Vorthon justification for this massacre? They claim it was a measured response to human aggression, replied Director Na Young from Strategic Operations. Their official statement says they targeted only military assets and that civilian casualties were minimal and unavoidable. Admiral Kim Dae looked at the frozen image on the display. It showed a Vorthon bomber deliberately strafing a playground where parents had been trying to protect their children. There was nothing minimal or unavoidable about that attack. "Sir," General Choi Won said carefully, "the Galactic Council is calling for restraint. They want us to respond through diplomatic channels." President Yoon-mi opened her eyes. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of humanity's rage. "Director Na," she said, "how long since we activated the war production protocols?" 18 hours, Madam President. Every shipyard in the solar system is now operating at maximum capacity. We estimate we can have the first battle groups ready for deployment in 6 months. "Not fast enough," Admiral Kim Dae said. "We need to respond while the galaxy is still watching." "Sir," interrupted Communications Director Lee. "So, we're receiving a priority transmission from Dr. Park Soo. She's aboard the refugee ship Peaceful Dawn, requesting permission to address the leadership directly." "Put her through," President Yoon-mi ordered. Dr. Park Soo's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted and haunted, but her eyes burned with determination. Behind her, Admiral Kim Dae could see other survivors from New Busan, including several children with bandaged arms and traumatized expressions. "Madam President," Dr. Park Soo began, "I need to tell you what I learned about the Vorthons during the attack. They don't think like us. To them, this wasn't a war crime. It was pest control." "Explain," Admiral Kim Dae said. "They consider us inferior beings," Dr. Park Soo continued. "In their culture, the strong have absolute right to dominate the weak. They targeted our children because they wanted to break our spirit quickly. They think we'll surrender rather than see more families destroyed." General Choi Won leaned forward. "What's your assessment of their military capabilities?" "Individually, their ships are more powerful than ours," Dr. Park Soo admitted. "But they fight like they've never faced real resistance. They expect quick victories and immediate submission. I don't think they understand what happens when they push humans too far." President Yoon-mi stood up slowly. She walked to the window that looked out over the sprawling military complex where millions of people worked around the clock to build humanity's defense. "Admiral Kim," she said without turning around, "what would you need to guarantee that no Vorthon ever threatens another human child?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Admiral Kim Dae understood exactly what the president was asking. "Not defeat the Vorthon fleet, not force a surrender. Complete elimination of the threat." Total mobilization, he answered. Every ship we can build, every weapon we can manufacture, and the political will to see it through to the end, no matter how long it takes. Define the end, President Yoon-mi said quietly. Until there are no more Vorthons with the capacity to harm civilians, Admiral Kim Dae replied. Until the threat is permanently eliminated. Director Na Young pulled up tactical displays showing Vorthon territory. Madam President, we're talking about a campaign that could last decades. The political and economic cost would be enormous. The cost of letting this go unpunished would be higher, President Yoon-mi said, finally turning back to face the room. Dr. Park Soo, in your professional opinion, will the Vorthons stop with New Busan? No, Madam President. They see our response as a test. If we don't retaliate decisively, they'll view it as proof that humans can be terrorized into submission. They'll attack more colonies, each time escalating until we either surrender or fight back. Then we fight back, President Yoon-mi said simply. General Choi, you are authorized to implement Operation Relentless Tide. Total war protocols are now in effect. Madam President, General Choi Wan said carefully, the Galactic Council will oppose this. They'll claim we're overreacting. The Yati Galactic Council sat silent while children were murdered, Admiral Kim Dae replied. Their opinion is no longer relevant to human security policy. Dr. Park Soo's voice came through the speakers again. There's something else you need to know. I monitored Vorthon communications during the attack. Commander Krixtal was promoting officers based on civilian kill counts. They recorded the massacre and transmitted it to other Vorthon worlds as entertainment. The room fell completely silent. Even hardened military officers looked shocked at this revelation. They had known the attack was deliberate, but to learn that it was treated as sport was almost incomprehensible. Entertainment, President Yoon-mi repeated quietly. They killed our children for entertainment. Yes, Madam President. President. Yoon-mi walked back to her chair and sat down. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, but carried an edge that made everyone in the room shiver. Admiral Kim, you asked what I would authorize to ensure no Vorthon ever threatens another human, child. The answer is everything. You have unlimited resources, unlimited authority, and unlimited time. I want every Vorthon who participated in this massacre hunted down and brought to justice. I want their military capability completely destroyed, and I want the galaxy to understand that humanity will never, ever forgive those who target our families. And if the Galactic Council tries to intervene, asked Director Na Young, then they can explain to their own people why they're protecting child killers, President Yoon-mi replied. Dr. Park Soo, I'm assigning you as Senior Advisor to Operation Relentless Tide. You understand these creatures better than anyone else. Madam. President, Dr. Park Soo said. There's one more thing. The Vorthans think they've shown us our place in the galactic order. They expect us to accept our status as their inferiors. They have no idea what's coming. Admiral Kim Dae smiled for the first time since seeing the massacre footage. It was not a pleasant expression. Then let's educate them. 6 months after the massacre at New Busan, High Admiral Krixtal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Absolute Victory, reviewing reports from across the Vorthon Empire. The human colony had been completely pacified, and not a single human ship had been seen in Vorthon space since the demonstration. As far as he was concerned, the matter was closed. The humans had learned their place. High Admiral, called his tactical officer, we're receiving priority communications from our border monitoring stations. Multiple contacts approaching the Thex Prime system. Krixtal barely looked up from his reports. Thex Prime was a minor industrial world, useful mainly for its automated factories and mining operations. Pirates sometimes raided the outer settlements, but nothing that required his personal attention. "How many ships?" he asked. "Sir, I'm having trouble getting an accurate count. The sensors keep showing different numbers." That was unusual enough to get Crixtall's attention. He walked over to the tactical display and looked at the readings himself. The numbers kept changing, first showing 50 contacts, then 100, then 500. Either their sensors were malfunctioning or... "Hi, Admiral!" The tactical officer's voice cracked with shock. "New contacts are decloaking throughout the system. Sir, there are over 2,000 ships out there." Crixtall stared at the display in disbelief. 2,000 ships would represent the largest fleet ever assembled in this part of the galaxy. The entire Vorthon Navy only had 3,000 vessels, and they were spread across dozens of systems. "Identify the fleet," he ordered. "Which species has this many ships?" The answer came back within moments, and it made no sense at all. "Sir, they're human vessels, all of them." "That's impossible," Crixtall said. "Humans don't have 2,000 ships. They barely have 200. But the evidence was right there on his screens. Ship after ship appeared as their cloaking systems, deactivated, each one bearing the distinctive design of human military vessels. Many of the designs were completely new, suggesting a massive building program that had somehow escaped Vorthon intelligence. "Open a channel to the lead ship," Crixtall ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what appeared to be a human dreadnought. At its center stood a man in a crisp military uniform, his face calm and professional. Behind him, Crixtall could see crew members working at stations that looked far more advanced than anything humans were supposed to possess. "I am Captain O, Jin of the Earth vessel Soul's Fury," the human said. "You are High Admiral Crixtall of the Vorthon Empire." "I am," Crixtall replied, trying to maintain his composure despite the shock of seeing such a massive human fleet. "What is the meaning of this invasion of Vorthon space?" "This is not an invasion," Captain Ojin said calmly. "This is justice. 6 months ago, you ordered the massacre of 3,000 civilians on New Busan. We have come to collect you and all personnel involved in that war crime." Crixtall's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "War crime? Captain, you mistake the natural order. The strong rule the weak. Your people learned this lesson at New Busan." "The only lesson we learned," Captain Ojin replied, "is that some species mistake mercy for weakness. We will not make that mistake again. You have one opportunity to surrender yourself and all personnel involved in the New Busan massacre. If you comply, civilian populations on this world will be protected. And if I refuse, then we will take you by force, and your refusal will be noted during your trial." High Admiral Crixtall looked at the tactical display again. Even with 2,000 ships, the humans were far from Vorthon territory. His own fleet could retreat to fortified positions and make them pay for every system. More importantly, this was clearly a desperate gambit, humans throwing everything they had into one massive attack. "You have made a serious mistake, Captain," Crixtall said. "You have brought your entire fleet far from human space, leaving your colonies defenseless. While you waste your strength here, other Vorthon fleets will be visiting Earth itself." Captain Ojin's expression didn't change. "High Admiral, this fleet represents approximately 15% of current human naval strength. The remaining 85% is distributed between defending our territory and hunting other Vorthon forces. The Bridge of the Absolute," Victory fell silent. 15%. That would mean humans had over 13,000 ships, more than the entire Galactic Council combined. It was impossible. "You're lying," Crixtal said. "Admiral Kim Day sends his regards," Captain Ojin replied. "He wanted me to inform you that humanity takes the murder of children very seriously. We have spent 6 months preparing our response." "Preparing?" Crixtal's voice carried a note of uncertainty now. "Every shipyard in human space has been working continuously since New Busan. Every factory has been converted to war production. Every human citizen has contributed to this effort. Did you think we would simply forget what you did to our families? On his tactical display, Crixtal could see his own fleet moving into defensive positions around Thex Prime. 47 ships against 2,000. Even with superior individual firepower, the odds were hopeless. "What are your terms?" he asked, hating himself for the question. "Unconditional surrender of all personnel involved in war crimes against human civilians. You will be transported to New Busan for trial under human law. And if we fight? Then you will die here, and we will move on to the next Vorthan system. The outcome will be the same, but more of your people will die unnecessarily." Crixtal looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. These were professional soldiers who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. The idea of surrendering to humans was almost inconceivable. "Ally ships," he announced over the fleet communications. "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. We're withdrawing to the Korvax system." "Hi, Admiral," Captain Ojin's voice came through the speakers. "You are making a mistake. There is no system in your empire where you can hide from human justice." "We shall see, Captain." The Vorthan fleet engaged their hyperspace drives simultaneously, disappearing in flashes of distorted light. Within moments, they were gone, leaving the human fleet alone in the Thex Prime system. On the surface of the planet below, Vorthan civilians watched in confusion as human landing craft began deploying across their world. But instead of the conquest they expected, the humans began distributing food and medical supplies. Automated factories that had been producing weapons were quickly converted to manufacturing civilian goods. A new message began broadcasting across the planet in perfect Vorthan. "Citizens of Thex Prime, you are now under the protection of the Human Federation. Any individual who has committed war crimes will be identified and removed for trial. All others will be treated according to galactic law and human ethical standards. We are not your conquerors. We are your liberators." High Admiral Crixtal received reports of the human occupation from his retreat position in the Korvax system. No civilian casualties, no looting or destruction. The humans were actually improving conditions on the planet they had just captured. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from Admiral Kim Day of the Human Federation." "Put it through." A new face appeared on the screen, older than Captain Ojin, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to look right through him. When Admiral Kim Day spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "High Admiral Crixtal, my name is Kim Day, Supreme Commander of Operation Relentless Tide. You have fled from justice once. You will not be permitted to do so again. We will follow you to every system in your empire until you surrender or until there are no more systems left to flee to." The transmission ended, leaving Crixtal staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew looked shaken. They had expected the humans to occupy Thex Prime and negotiate. Instead, they seemed to be treating this as the beginning of a much longer campaign. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, Long-range sensors are detecting human fleet movements throughout the border region. It looks like they're positioning forces to cut off our retreat routes. For the first time since New Busan, High Admiral Krixtal began to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. Admiral Lee Hyun stood in the command center of the New Busan Memorial, the flagship of the human pursuit fleet. Through the viewing ports, he could see the smoking remains of another Vorthan military base. This was the 14th system they had cleansed of Vorthan military presence in 3 months, and still High Admiral Krixtal continued to flee. "Admiral," called Captain Park 1 from the communications station, "we're receiving surrender offers from the Vorthan civilian government on Zerion 3. They want to negotiate for the safety of their families." Standard response, "Admiral," Lee Hyun replied without taking his eyes off the tactical display. "All civilians will be protected under human law. All military personnel who participated in war crimes will be arrested for trial. All military infrastructure will be destroyed." Dr. Park Soo, now wearing the uniform of a strategic operations advisor, looked up from her analysis reports. "Admiral, I'm concerned about the pattern we're seeing. The Vorthans are abandoning their outer colonies too easily. It's like they're leading us somewhere." "Agreed," Admiral Lee Hyun said. "Your assessment?" "They're hoping we'll overextend ourselves," Dr. Park Soo replied. "Classic military strategy. Draw the enemy deep into your territory, then cut off their supply lines and surround them." Admiral Lee Hyun smiled grimly. "They still don't understand how humans fight. Captain Park, signal the fleet. Inform all commanders that we're implementing Protocol 7. "Sir, Protocol 7 requires—" Captain Park 1 paused, checking his orders again. "Complete industrial sterilization of every system we pass through." Admiral Lee Hyun finished. "Every weapons factory, every shipyard, every military academy." "We're not just chasing Krixtal anymore, Doctor. We're ensuring he has nothing left to run back to." The human fleet moved through Vorthan space like a methodical storm. They didn't simply defeat military forces, they eliminated military capability entirely. Weapons factories were reduced to rubble. Shipyards were stripped of all useful equipment. Military bases were not captured but completely demolished. But the civilians in each system found themselves better off than they had ever been under Vorthan rule. Human engineers repaired infrastructure that had been neglected for decades. Human doctors provided medical care that the Vorthan military had reserved for themselves. Human teachers began educating alien children in sciences that their previous rulers had kept secret. On Earth, President Yoon Mi reviewed the daily reports with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The operation was succeeding beyond all expectations, but the political pressure from other galactic powers was mounting. "Madam President," Director Na Young reported from her position at the conference table, "the Kethran Dominion is requesting permission to mediate between humanity and the Vorthan Empire. They're concerned about the scope of our military operations." "What did you tell them?" "That humanity appreciates their concern but will not negotiate while war criminals remain at large." General Choi Won activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated Vorthan military positions, while blue markers showed human fleet movements. The pattern was clear. The Vorthans were being systematically cornered. "The Granite Lords have also expressed concerns," General Choi Won added. "They're worried that our destruction of Vorthan military infrastructure is destabilizing the entire region." "Their concern is noted," President Yoon Mi replied coldly. "Did any of these species express concern when Vorthan ships were murdering our children?" "No, Madam President." "Then their opinions on our response are irrelevant." Admiral Kim Dae's image appeared on the main communications screen. transmitting from the command ship Soul's Fury somewhere deep in Vorthan territory. "Madam President," he began, "I have an update on High Admiral Krikstal's position. Our intelligence suggests he's retreating toward the Vorthan home system. Our pursuit fleets are in position to intercept. Estimated time to capture? 2 weeks, assuming he doesn't have any surprises waiting for us. But, Madam President, there's something else you need to know. We've been monitoring Galactic Council communications. They're planning to intervene militarily if we don't accept mediation." President Yoon Mi was quiet for a long moment. The idea that other species would protect war criminals was almost incomprehensible to her, but she had learned that alien concepts of justice were very different from human ones. "Admiral Kim, what would be the result of Galactic Council intervention?" "They would demand we cease operations and enter negotiations. Krikstal and his people would escape justice, and the message to the galaxy would be that humans can be bullied into submission if enough pressure is applied." "Unacceptable," President Yoon Mi said immediately. "What are our options?" "We can accelerate the timeline. If we capture Krikstal before the Council acts, they'll be faced with a fait accompli. The alternative is to fight them as well. And if we have to fight the Galactic Council," Admiral Kim Day's expression was grim but determined. "We win, Madam President. Our industrial capacity is now exceeding the rest of the galaxy combined. But the cost in lives and resources would be enormous." Dr. Park Su's voice came through the communication system from the New Busan Memorial. "Madam President, if I may offer a perspective, the Galactic Council's intervention would prove that the galaxy's power structure is designed to protect those who commit atrocities against the weak. If we yield to them now, every human colony becomes a potential target." Explain. "Species like the Vorthons see negotiated peace as proof that their actions are acceptable. If the galaxy's leadership protects them from consequences, they'll view it as permission to continue. The next massacre won't be 3,000 humans. It might be 30,000. President Yoon Mi understood the logic, but the implications were staggering. Humanity had never sought to become the galaxy's policeman, but they were being forced into that role by the failure of existing institutions. "Admiral Kim," she said finally, "accelerate the pursuit. I want Krikstal in custody before the Galactic Council can act." "And Admiral?" "Yes, Madam President. If the Council chooses to protect war criminals, make sure they understand the full consequences of that decision." Back on the New Busan Memorial, Admiral Lee Hyun received the new orders with grim satisfaction. The pursuit fleet immediately changed course, abandoning their methodical approach in favor of a direct sprint toward the Vorthon home system. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communications. "We are now engaged in a race against galactic politics. Our goal remains unchanged, justice for the victims of New Busan. But our timeline has been accelerated." Dr. Park Su looked at the updated tactical display, watching as human fleets converged from multiple directions toward the heart of the Vorthan Empire. "Admiral," she said quietly, "what happens if we catch him?" "He stands trial for his crimes, Doctor. Just like we promised." "And what happens if the galaxy tries to stop us?" Admiral Lee Hyun was quiet for a moment, thinking about the children who had died at New Busan, about the families destroyed by Vorthan entertainment, about the message that would be sent if humanity allowed such crimes to go unpunished. Then, the galaxy learns what happens when you stand between humans and justice, Doctor. They learn that some principles are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The pursuit fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing against time toward a confrontation that, would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. High Admiral Krixtal paced the command deck of his flagship as it orbited the fortified world of Vorthos Prime, the heart of his crumbling empire. Through the viewport, he could see the massive orbital defense platforms that had protected the Vorthan homeworld for over 1,000 years. Soon, those same platforms would be facing the largest human fleet ever assembled. "Status report," he demanded from his tactical officer. "Sir, human forces are converging on our position from 7 different vectors. Total enemy strength is estimated at over 8,000 vessels. Our remaining fleet numbers 432 ships." The numbers were staggering. In less than a year, the humans had built more ships than the Vorthan Empire possessed in total. Even more troubling was the systematic way they had destroyed every Vorthan military installation between here and human space. There would be no reinforcements coming. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting permission to send mediators." "Put them through," Krixtal ordered. The holographic display showed Ambassador Veltar, the same ancient Nexian who had warned against attacking the humans so many months ago. His 4 arms trembled with age, but his eyes were sharp with understanding. "Hi, Admiral Krixtal," Veltar began. "The Galactic Council offers to mediate this dispute. We can arrange for your safe passage to neutral territory in exchange for an end to hostilities." "And the humans? Have they agreed to this mediation?" Veltar's hesitation told Krixtal everything he needed to know. The human leadership has stated that they will not negotiate while war criminals remain at large. But we believe we can convince them to accept a compromise. "What kind of compromise?" "Exile instead of execution. Reparations instead of total destruction. The Council believes this would satisfy human demands for justice while preserving the stability of the region." Krixtal looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were all warriors who had served the Empire faithfully. The idea of begging humans for mercy was almost unbearable, but the alternative was the complete destruction of their civilization. "I need time to consider this offer," he said finally. "Time is something you have very little of," Veltar replied. "Human forces will be in this system within days. After that, the Council's ability to intervene will be severely limited." The transmission ended, leaving Krixtal alone with his thoughts. Through the viewport, he could see civilian transports fleeing the inner system, carrying Vorthan families to safety in neutral space. At least the humans had kept their word about protecting non-combatants. "Sir," his intelligence officer called out, "we're receiving disturbing reports from our deep space monitoring stations. Human fleets are moving toward the Nexian border, the Kethron colonies, and several other neutral systems." "What?" Krixtal spun around. "Why would they attack neutral systems?" "Unknown, sir. But the pattern suggests they're positioning forces to intercept any attempts at Galactic Council intervention." The implications hit Krixtal like a physical blow. The humans weren't just hunting him. They were preparing to fight the entire galaxy if necessary. The scope of their response was beyond anything he had imagined possible. "Sir," his tactical officer said urgently, "incoming transmission from our scout ships. The human fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system." The main display showed what could only be described as an armada. Thousands of human ships stretched across space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive blue and white markings of the Human Federation. At their head was a massive dreadnought that could only be the new Busan Memorial. "Open a channel," Krixtal ordered. Admiral Li Hyun appeared on the screen. his face calm but determined. Behind him, Crixtal could see the bridge of what was clearly the most advanced warship in this part of the galaxy. "High Admiral Crixtal," Admiral Li Hyun said without preamble. "I am Admiral Li Hyun of the Human Federation Navy. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and your remaining personnel will be treated according to galactic law. And if I refuse, then we will take this system by force, and your refusal will be noted during your trial for war crimes." Crixtal felt his composure finally crack. "War crimes? Admiral, we acted according to our nature. The strong rule the weak. This is the law of the universe." "The law of the universe," Admiral Li Hyun replied coldly, "is that actions have consequences. You chose to murder children. Now you face the consequences of that choice." "This is madness," Crixtal exploded. "You're one species against the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council will never allow this." The Galactic Council had their chance to prevent this when they chose to ignore your atrocities. Their failure to act does not constitute authority over human justice. On his tactical display, Crixtal could see more human ships arriving every minute. The humans had clearly been planning this moment for months, positioning their forces to create an inescapable trap. "Admiral," Crixtal said, trying to regain his composure, "surely we can reach some accommodation. The Council has offered to mediate. The time for mediation was before you decided to murder 3,000 civilians for entertainment," Admiral Li Hyun interrupted. "You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will consider all Vorthan military personnel to be hostile combatants." The transmission ended, leaving Crixtal staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. But what orders could he give? Fight and die, or surrender and face human justice? "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving priority transmissions from Galactic Council forces. They're demanding that we stand down and allow them to take custody of our leadership for neutral arbitration." For a moment, Crixtal felt a surge of hope. If the Council could take him into protective custody, he might avoid human justice entirely. "Signal the Council forces," he ordered. "Tell them we accept their protection." But even as he spoke, new alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the tactical display, he could see human fighter squadrons moving to intercept the Council vessels. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are blocking Council approach vectors. They're broadcasting a warning that any interference with human justice operations will be considered an act of war." "They wouldn't dare attack Council forces," Crixtal said, but his voice lacked conviction. His answer came in the form of Admiral Kim Dae's voice over the general communications frequency, speaking directly to the Council ships. "This is Admiral Kim Dae, Supreme Commander of Operation Relentless Tide. You are interfering with the pursuit of war criminals. You have 2 options. Withdraw immediately, or be treated as accomplices to genocide. This is your only warning." On his screen, Crixtal could see the Council ships hesitating, clearly uncertain how to respond to such a direct threat. The humans had called their bluff, and everyone knew it. "Sir," his communications officer said urgently, "the Council ships are withdrawing. They're abandoning us." Crixtal felt the last of his hope drain away. The galaxy's most powerful alliance had just retreated rather than face human determination. He was truly alone. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communications, "prepare for our final battle. We die as warriors of the Empire." But even as he spoke, Crixtal knew that this wasn't really about warrior honor anymore. This was about the consequences of underestimating a species that would cross the galaxy to protect their children. The human fleet began its final approach, and High Admiral Crixtel prepared to learn the true meaning of human justice. Ambassador Veltar's shuttle approached the massive hull of the New Busan Memorial under heavy escort. The ancient Nexian diplomat had requested this meeting personally, claiming it was the galaxy's last hope for avoiding a war that could consume multiple species. As his small craft docked with the human flagship, he could see the orbital battle raging around Vorthos Prime through the viewport. The Vorthan defenses were crumbling, massive orbital platforms that had protected the homeworld for a millennium were being systematically destroyed by human precision strikes. But what disturbed Veltar most was the complete absence of hatred in the human assault. They fought with the cold efficiency of surgeons removing a cancer. Admiral Li Hyun met him personally at the airlock. The human officer looked tired, but determined, his uniform bearing the insignia of someone who had seen too much war in too short a time. "Ambassador Veltar," Admiral Li Hyun said with respectful courtesy, "welcome aboard. I understand you wished to discuss terms for ending this conflict." "I did, Admiral. Though I fear I may be too late." They walked through corridors lined with memorial plaques, names and pictures of every civilian killed at New Busan. Veltar noticed that many of the faces were children, their young features preserved forever in holographic displays. "Admiral," Veltar began carefully, "the Galactic Council understands that High Admiral Crixtal committed serious crimes against your people. We are prepared to offer significant concessions to end this war." "What kind of concessions?" "Exile for Crixtal and his senior officers. Reparations for the families of New Busan. Guaranteed autonomy for human space. The Council will formally condemn the attacks and ensure nothing like this happens again." Admiral Li Hyun stopped walking and turned to face the ambassador. "And what guarantee do we have that the Council will honor these promises?" "You have my personal word, Admiral, the word of the Galactic Council itself. The same council that stood silent while our children were murdered for entertainment." Veltar's forearms sagged with the weight of that accusation. "Admiral, the Council makes mistakes. We are not perfect, but surely peace is preferable to the path you are on now." They entered the ship's main briefing room, where Dr. Park Soo was waiting with detailed files on Vorthan war crimes. The walls were covered with tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of Vorthan military infrastructure across dozens of star systems. "Dr. Park Soo," Admiral Li Hyun said, "Ambassador Veltar is offering exile for Crixtal in exchange for ending our operations." Dr. Park Soo looked up from her reports, her eyes reflecting the same cold determination that Veltar had seen in every human he had encountered. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "what happens the next time a species decides that human civilians are acceptable targets? What stops them from following the Vorthan example?" "The Council will intervene," Veltar replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "The way you intervened at New Busan?" Dr. Park Soo asked. "Ambassador, with respect, your Council's intervention consists of asking us to show mercy to those who showed none to our families." Veltar activated a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Human fleets were positioned throughout known space, clearly prepared for a much larger conflict. "Admiral, Doctor, please consider the broader implications of your actions. If you continue this course, you will face the combined might of 17 different species. The cost in lives will be enormous." The cost of allowing war criminals to escape justice would be higher, Admiral Lee Hyun replied. Ambassador, you're asking us to establish a precedent that anyone can massacre human civilians as long as they're politically powerful enough to hide behind the Galactic Council. That's not what I'm asking. It's exactly what you're asking, Dr. Park Soo interrupted. You're asking us to accept that some people are above justice because punishing them would be inconvenient for galactic politics. Through the briefing room's windows, they could see the final Vorthan orbital platform exploding in a burst of brilliant light. The planet's defenses had been completely eliminated, and human landing forces were beginning their assault on the surface. Admiral, Veltar said urgently, once you capture Krixtal, what then? You've demonstrated your point. The galaxy has seen human strength. Surely that's enough. Admiral Lee Hyun was quiet for a long moment, watching the invasion proceed with mechanical precision. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Ambassador, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't about demonstrating human strength. This is about justice. Krixtal will stand trial for his crimes. Every officer who participated in the massacre will face human law. Every Vorthon who cheered while our children died will answer for their part in genocide. And if the galaxy tries to stop you, then the galaxy will learn that humans are far more dangerous as enemies than they ever were as friends. Dr. Park Soo activated another display, showing industrial production figures from human space. The numbers were staggering. Humanity was now producing more military hardware than the rest of the galaxy combined. Ambassador, she said, did you know that the average human works 16 hours a day now? That our children ask to help in the factories instead of playing games? We've transformed our entire civilization into a machine for ensuring that what happened at New Busan never happens again. But surely you can't maintain this level of mobilization indefinitely. We can maintain it as long as necessary, Admiral, Lee Hyun replied. Every human understands what's at stake here. We're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting for the principle that innocent life has value. A new alarm sounded, and Captain Park Won's voice came over the intercom. Admiral, we've received confirmation that High Admiral Krixtal has been captured alive. He's being transported to the surface for processing. Veltar felt a chill of fear. Processing? Documentation of his crimes, identification of his accomplices, preparation for trial, Dr. Park Soo explained. We've been very thorough in our investigation, Ambassador. We know exactly who did what at New Busan. Admiral, Veltar said desperately, if you execute Krixtal, you'll be no better than he is. Ambassador, Admiral Lee Hyun replied calmly, we're not executing him. We're putting him on trial in front of the families of his victims. If he's found guilty, he'll face the consequences. That's called justice. And if the Galactic Council declares your trial illegitimate, then the Galactic Council will have declared that it considers the murder of human children to be legitimate, Dr. Park Soo said. I'm sure their constituents will be very interested to learn about that position. Through the windows, they could see human transport ships landing on Vorthos Prime's surface. The planet that had been the center of a 1,000-year empire was now under complete human control. Ambassador, Admiral Lee Hyun said, I want you to understand something. We didn't choose this war. We didn't want to become the galaxy's police force. But when your council failed to protect innocent life, you forced us to take on that responsibility. What does that mean for the future? It means that humanity will ensure that species like the Vorthons never again have the power to commit genocide. It means that anyone who targets civilian populations will face immediate and overwhelming retaliation. And it means that the galaxy's political institutions will either adapt to support justice, or they will be replaced by institutions that do. Veltar looked at the two humans sitting across from him, a military officer and a scientist who had been transformed by tragedy into something the galaxy had never seen before. They weren't conquerors driven by greed or ambition. They were guardians driven by an absolute moral certainty that innocent life must be protected. "Admiral," he said quietly, "you realize that you're reshaping the entire galactic order." "Yes, Ambassador. We realize that. The question is whether the galaxy will accept the new order willingly, or whether it will have to be imposed by force." The trial of High Admiral Krixtal would begin within days, and with it, a new chapter in galactic history where human concepts of justice would become the standard by which all civilizations were measured. 2 years after the massacre at New Busan, President Yoon Mi stood before the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Kepler 442b. The chamber looked the same as it had when Ambassador Veltar first warned against attacking humanity, but everything else had changed. Where once representatives from dozens of species had gathered as equals, now they sat in the shadow of human power. The trial of High Admiral Krixtal had ended 6 months ago. The Vorthan war criminal had been found guilty of genocide and executed by the families of his victims, broadcast live across the galaxy. His final words had been a warning to other species. "Do not underestimate the humans. They will hunt you to the ends of space." President Yoon Mi approached the speaking platform, her small figure somehow commanding the attention of every being in the vast chamber. Behind her stood Admiral Kim Dae and Dr. Park Soo, representing the military and scientific leadership that had transformed humanity into the galaxy's dominant power. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," President Yoon Mi began, her voice carrying clearly through the perfect acoustics, "humanity did not seek the role we now occupy. We were a peaceful species, content to trade and explore among the stars. That changed when you allowed our children to be murdered for entertainment." A ripple of uncomfortable silence went through the chamber. Many of the representatives had opposed human actions, but none had been willing to face the consequences of stopping them. "Today, the Vorthan Empire no longer exists," President Yoon Mi continued. "Their military capability has been completely eliminated. Their war criminals have faced justice. Their civilian populations have been relocated to worlds where they can rebuild their lives without the capacity to threaten others." Ambassador Veltar, now one of the few council members who regularly communicated with human leadership, activated a holographic display showing the transformation of former Vorthan space. Worlds that had been military strongholds were now peaceful colonies. Weapons factories had been converted to produce medical equipment and farming tools. Former slave worlds were now thriving under human protection. "We have also established the Human Justice Corps," President Yoon Mi announced. "A permanent fleet dedicated to preventing future genocides. Director Na Young leads this organization with authority to intervene anywhere in the galaxy where civilian populations are threatened." The implications were clear to everyone in the chamber. Humanity had appointed itself as the galaxy's protector, whether other species wanted that protection or not. "Madam President," spoke the Kethran representative, his mandibles clicking. Nervously, "the Dominion questions the authority by which humanity claims jurisdiction over other species." President Yoon Mi turned to face the insectoid diplomat. "The same authority that allowed you to stand silent while our children were killed. The authority of being willing to act when others will not. Dr. Park Soo stepped forward, activating another display that showed industrial production figures from across human space. The numbers were overwhelming. Humanity was now producing more ships, weapons, and industrial goods than the rest of the galaxy combined. Representatives, Dr. Park Soo said, you seem to misunderstand what happened during Operation Relentless Tide. This wasn't a military conquest. This was an industrial transformation. Every human citizen contributed to our response. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility was dedicated to ensuring that genocide would never again go unpunished. But surely you can't maintain this level of militarization indefinitely, protested the Granite Lord representative, his rocky features showing concern. We can maintain it as long as necessary, Admiral Kimday replied. Our children work in the factories now, proud to contribute to galactic peace. Our scientists dedicate their research to better ways of protecting innocent life. Our military trains constantly to respond to any threat against civilian populations. President Yoon Mi walked to the center of the speaking circle, her presence somehow filling the enormous chamber. Let me be absolutely clear about humanity's position going forward, she said. Any species that targets civilian populations will face immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Any government that permits genocide will be removed. Any military that threatens innocent life will be eliminated. And who decides what constitutes a threat? Asked the Zephyrian delegate, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. Human observers are being stationed throughout the galaxy, President Yoon Mi replied. They will monitor for signs of military buildup against civilian targets, systematic oppression, or preparation for genocide. Their reports will guide Human Justice Corps responses. The chamber erupted in concerned voices as representatives realized the full scope of what humanity was implementing. They were being placed under permanent surveillance by a species that had demonstrated the will and ability to destroy entire civilizations. This is occupation, protested the Nexus Collective representative. You're imposing human values on the entire galaxy. We're imposing the value that innocent life should be protected, Dr. Park Soo replied calmly. If you find that controversial, perhaps you should examine your own values. Ambassador Veltar rose slowly from his chair, his forearms trembling with age and emotion. Madam President, what you're describing is essentially the end of independent governance for most species. How is this different from the tyranny you fought against? President Yoon Mi was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Ambassador, tyranny is the strong oppressing the weak for their own benefit. What we're implementing is the strong protecting the weak because it's the right thing to do. The difference is that we gain nothing from this responsibility except the knowledge that children can sleep safely. And if we refuse to accept human oversight, the Kethran representative demanded. Admiral Kim Day stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had remade the galaxy through sheer determination. Then you will be free to govern yourselves without human interference, he said. But you will also be cut off from human trade, human technology, and human protection. And if you threaten civilian populations anywhere in the galaxy, you will face the full might of human justice. The threat was implicit but clear. Humanity controlled enough industrial capacity to blockade any species that opposed them, and their fleets were positioned to respond to aggression anywhere in known space. Representatives, President Yoon Mi said, returning to the speaking platform, we understand that this new order is difficult to accept. But remember what brought us to this point. The Galactic Council failed to protect innocent life when it mattered. The traditional institutions proved inadequate when faced with genocide. We will not allow that failure to be repeated. Dr. Park. Sue activated a final display, showing the bustling activity on New Busan. The colony had been completely rebuilt, with gleaming cities and orbital installations that surpassed anything that had existed before the attack. But at the center of the main city stood a memorial to the 3,000 victims, their names and faces preserved forever in crystal and light. "This is what we're fighting for," Dr. Park Sue said. "Not conquest or glory, but the simple principle that every child in the galaxy deserves to grow up safe from those who would harm them for political gain." President Yoon Mi prepared to leave the chamber, but paused at the great doors for one final statement. "Representatives, humanity offers you a choice. Work with us to build a galaxy where genocide is impossible, or oppose us and face the consequences. But understand this. The time when powerful species could massacre the weak without response is over. That age died with the Vorthon Empire." As the human delegation left the chamber, Ambassador Veltar looked around at his fellow representatives. Some appeared angry, others frightened, but none looked willing to challenge humanity's new order. The species that had once been dismissed as primitive children had become the galaxy's guardians, and nothing would ever be the same. Outside the chamber, Admiral Kim Dae received a report from Captain Oh Jin, now commanding the Justice Corps flagship Soul's Fury. "Admiral, we're detecting military buildup in the Korvax system. Appears to be preparation for an assault on their own civilian population." "Response time to intercept?" Admiral Kim Dae asked. 47 hours, sir." "Make it 30. And Captain?" "Yes." "Sir?" "Make sure they understand that the galaxy is watching. The age of unopposed atrocity is over." The Human Justice Corps fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it humanity's promise that never again would children die while the powerful stood silent. The galaxy had learned what happened when you awakened Earth's protective instincts, and that lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come.